President Donald Trump is expected to attend the 2025 Daytona 500, and Hendrick Motorsports will be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Tibbits Lumber, as it was announced earlier today that Tibbits Lumber will sponsor Spencer Boyd at the season-opening Truck Series race at Daytona National Speedway. I do expect that Tibbits will sponsor Spencer Boyd in other select races throughout 2025 as well. Tibbits Lumber sponsored Spencer Boyd in select races in 2024, and they've had a really good partnership with Spencer over the course of the last couple of years, going back to his days at Young's Motorsports in the Craftsman Truck Series. I think the car will probably look really good, and the truck will look really, really solid. Pretty excited that Tibbits will get to work with him in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson and Marty Smith. As it was announced earlier today that Jimmie Johnson and Marty Smith are teaming up for a new podcast that's going to be happening on all podcast platforms and also on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. That's going to be called Never Settle. It will also be airing every single Wednesday on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio as well. This appearing that I really didn't expect to be doing a podcast, but it's certainly interesting. Marty Smith, who does a lot of stuff for college football with ESPN currently at the moment. We also know he's got a pretty big affiliation with NASCAR as well, as he was part of the documentary that, of course, was on Netflix this past year. And I think that Jimmie and Marty Smith will generally do a very, very good job with this podcast. It's really, really exciting to see for sure, and pretty awesome to see they'll be teaming up for a new podcast going into 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kaitlyn Vincie. As it was announced earlier today that Kaitlyn Vincie has signed a multi-year contract extension with Fox Sports to continue being a peer reporter for the program starting in 2025. Kaitlyn Vincie has been part of the Fox family and networks going back to 2015 or 2016, as she was a reporter, I believe, for the ARCA races back in the day, and for at least the last couple of years before they closed the studio with Race Hub going away from Fox. She was, of course, part of the studio hosting for the Craftsman Truck Series and also ARCA races as well. Kaitlyn Vincie's done a really good job working with Fox over the course of the last 2 years, and I think it's a really good decision to bring her back, at least for the foreseeable future. She's very well respected in the industry, and think, like I said, she has done overall a very, very good job, as she's done a lot of great things for Fox over the course of the last couple of years. I think it's great to see that she'll once again be with Fox Sports for the foreseeable future and work with them going forward. Great to see she'll be back with them in 2025 and for the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Niece Motorsports. As it was announced earlier today that Niece Motorsports officially has a new logo for 2025. With Niece Motorsports ending their 10th year in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, going all the way back to 2016, they've got a new logo for this year. And if you take a look at this new logo, it has got a new 10-year anniversary logo. This is going to be the 10th year of Niece Motorsports being in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, and since they started up back in 2016, they have had a ton of success. They've won a lot of races with guys like Ross Chastain and have competed for championships with Ross Chastain. They've won races with Carson Osbar. In 2023, they won 4 or 5 races with Carson en route to making it to the Championship 4, which unfortunately led to a lot of controversy for the program. And they've also had a ton of other success as well and been pretty competitive with other guys like Caden Honeycutt as well. I think it's really huge at how much success they've had over the years, and I think it's really exciting to see that Niece Motorsports able to form a partnership, and it had a lot of great partnerships over the years. It's pretty exciting. They're going to be coming into their 10th year with all the success they've had as an organization. Pretty exciting to see what they've been able to accomplish as a program for as long as they've been around, and I think this is a team that has a lot of potential to get better also in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Christopher Bell. Now, last night, Christopher Bell was competing alongside Kyle Larson at the World of Outlaws season opener at Volusia County. And Christopher Bell was able to hold off a hard charge on Kyle Larson at the end of the event by 5/1000 of a second, held him off, and picked up the win in the World of Outlaws event. Also, Christopher Bell is now the points leader in the World of Outlaws currently at the moment as well. I saw the finish of the race, and I gotta say, I feel bad for Emerson Axsom, because Emerson Axsom absolutely had the dominant car for sure, and probably should have won this race. I think this kid is without question the real deal, and I think he's going to have a lot of success in the League of World of Outlaws down the road. But I think that both Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson put on an absolute masterclass and incredible show. And I think that Christopher Bell going to victory lane, we know Christopher Bell has a lot of ambitions to win his first ever NASCAR Cup Series championship this year, but beating Kyle Larson, who is arguably one of the best drivers in the world, is pretty incredible accomplishment for Bell. He beat Kyle Larson, of course, at the Tulsa Shootout. Wasn't as competitive as at the Chili Bowl, but I think it's pretty awesome to see Christopher Bell be able to go to victory lane, be super fast, be super competitive, and go out there, have a chance to win races and compete. So congratulations to Christopher Bell once again on picking up the win at the World of Outlaws race at Volusia, a well-deserved win after being up front in position. Congrats to him on picking up the win. Really exciting stuff in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rev Racing. As it was announced earlier today that Rev Racing has announced a bunch of different driver lineups for 2025. And there were two notable announcements for 2025 as well. As expected, LeVar Scott will be back full-time in the ARCA series in 2025, driving, I believe, the number 2 car. He will take over the 2 car from the past year, as of course a driver drove the 2 car last year. Andres Perez-Laura moves up to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series full-time with Spire Motorsports this year. LeVar Scott finished second in the championship last season and had a very strong season, even though he wasn't really up front competing for wins on a consistent basis, though he did have some top 5 finishes throughout the year. LeVar did show a lot of growth and a lot of promise last year, and I really think LeVar Scott does have a good chance and opportunity, especially at Daytona this upcoming week. I think he does have a very good opportunity to win the championship this year with Rev Racing. A lot of big-time drivers have come through Rev Racing. Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson, Nick Sanchez have come through, and Dale Suarez has also come through as well, who we'll talk about in just a short little bit. It was also announced as well that Laney Busey will be making select starts in ARCA also in 2025, while she could be full-time in the Cars Tour with Lee Pullman Racing. Laney Busey, there's a lot of talk around her. She's someone that's shown a lot of promise on the late model side. She's been part of the Rev Racing group for the last couple years, and I think that she could be someone to watch out for down the road. We've seen some drivers come through those ranks. Some have had success, others not so much. But I do think that they both have a ton of potential going into the year. I did see Nathan Lyons did sign for the NASCAR Weekly Series that NASCAR does, which I think that Nathan, that young man, has a lot of potential as well. Overall, I think I really like the Rev Racing lineup they've got for the year, and I think it is, all things considered, a very solid lineup going into 2025. Excited to see how things will end up working for the Rev Racing group in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Netflix. As there was a report by Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal that Netflix is expected to step into the bidding war for U.S. Formula One races to be aired on there in 2025, going into 2026. Currently at the moment, ESPN is in a contract year for the Formula One races to be aired on the U.S. at the conclusion of 2025. And it seems like this bidding war is going to be going between both of the entities for 2026. Now, Netflix already has an association with Formula One with Drive to Survive. So with that association, I think there's definitely a chance and possibility, considering the fact that, one, Netflix is getting involved in live sports in a pretty big way. We all remember the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight, which was unfortunately a big failure. But I do think overall, when you think about this, I think that Netflix is going to pay a ton of money to try to get it on there. We have seen the increase from $1 million to $90 million for when they try to get it over there and all the races on the U.S. without the commercials. That's why the deal got increased in the U.S. so much, because of that. I think if Netflix puts a bigger bid on it, I think they've got a fantastic chance and opportunity to go ahead and win it. And I think it's very likely they're going to be in the running to try to get that done. And I think when it comes to money inside of things, Netflix, they've got a big capital and they've got a lot of money as well they can absolutely use to try to go when it comes to bidding something as big as this. So we'll see what happens in regards to this, but this is absolutely huge when it comes to the race, when it comes to Netflix. They're getting into the side of things. They're going to have the WWE on there exclusively, I believe, and have some other NFL games going on there as well down the road. So it isn't the most shocking and surprising thing, all things considered, when you think about Netflix getting involved in it. But I think Netflix does have a chance and opportunity to win it over, and we'll see what happens in regards to Netflix's future in Formula One down the road. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the ARCA race at Daytona, as the entry list has been revealed for the Ride to Dente 200 at Daytona International Speedway. And we're talking about some of the notable entries that are going to be entering that race at Daytona International Speedway. First, Brendan Butterbean Queen will drive the number 28 car for Pinnacle Racing Group. You've also got Isabel Robusto, who's going to drive the 55 car for Venturini Motorsports. I believe Tony Breidinger's also been entered into that event as well. I think I did see that Taylor or Tanner Gray is going to drive the number 18, or William Sawalch is going to drive the number 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing. But there's three other pretty big entries that I noticed on the entry list for the race at Daytona. First, Cletus McFarland, aka Garrett Mitchell, will be attempting to make his ARCA Series debut at Daytona International Speedway in the number 30 car for Rhett Jones Racing. Rhett Jones Racing, the team, has had solid success with drivers like Frankie Muniz, as Frankie, of course, drove full-time for the team in 2023 and had some decent success and was the points leader at one point, and he got a top 10 at Daytona in the opener. Cletus McFarland's been taking this very, very seriously, and it's a huge deal that he is going to be running the ARCA race at Daytona. He will have to qualify his way in first. We don't know what the owner's point situation is since that 30 car did not run the full season last year, but I think he does have a great chance and opportunity to make it. Next, Corey Day will make one of his 4 scheduled ARCA starts for 2025 at Daytona in the number 77 car for Aspire Motorsports. Aspire Motorsports moves over to ARCA full-time for the first time ever. Corey Day, very talented driver, part of the Hendrick pipeline, as he has signed a development contract with Hendrick Motorsports for the next couple of years. Corey Day, I think, has a ton of promise and a ton of potential. For what I heard, he looked really solid at the test. I do genuinely think that Corey Day could have a very, very strong season in 2025, and we'll see what he can do this year with them at Daytona. And finally, Elio Castroneves is going to drive the other Pinnacle Racing Group car, that being the number 82 machine. Elio Castroneves is already guaranteed in the Daytona 500 this year, driving the 91 car for Trackhouse. He will be one of the open cars going up against guys like Chandler Smith, Justin Allgaier, and Jimmy Johnson as well, and Martin Truex Jr. But I think he's got a really good opportunity and chance to make it very easily there. He's already guaranteed a spot, but NASCAR wanted him to get some experience in the event, and I really think that the lineup for Daytona for ARCA is very stacked, and I do think it's a very solid lineup going into 2025 for the event at Daytona International Speedway. Definitely looking forward to that when we do get to Daytona in a couple weeks from now, which is next week, which is really exciting. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about race manipulation. As it was announced that we did a video covering this on the channel yesterday, but it was officially confirmed that NASCAR has made a new update to the rules in regards to race manipulation. Now, NASCAR had unveiled a new rule that used to be called the 100% rule back in 2013 or 2014 after the whole Michael Waltrip Racing fiasco that took place at Richmond in 2013 called Spingate. And NASCAR pretty much told all the teams that were implementing the 100% rule at that point. After what happened in Martinsville, NASCAR had to make some new changes when it comes to manipulation. Because we saw what happened with the Chevrolets. William Byron was getting helped by multiple teams, that being Austin Dillon and Ross Chastain, and potentially Carson Osbar as well. And those teams got hammered on that front. While on the Toyota side of things, you had Christopher Bell wall riding unintentionally, I think. And the Bubba also is backing up. They were saying they may have had a flat tire, but they're not entirely sure. And basically, NASCAR quintessentially told the teams and the manufacturers, we're going to go really hard on you. So they could have a potential possibility of 25 to 50 manufacturer points being taken away from them, which could be really, really huge. RCFD points could be coming into play, and testing also could be affected. There could be as many as 2 or 3 tests that could be taken away from the teams if the teams do go ahead and manipulate the outcomes of the races. Now, obviously, NASCAR is in a really tough position here because they only got 3 manufacturers currently at the moment right now. And let's say this race manipulation effect comes into play, and we see NASCAR have to be put in a difficult and tough position where they have to make a decision on that front. They may have no choice but to penalize the manufacturers. And I think that NASCAR is in a really difficult position. I think one thing that really could put an end to all this nonsense with race manipulation, the easiest thing they could have done is just gone back to either a full season format or gone back to the chase format. And you might get some manipulation in the OG chase format, but you're not going to have the consistent manipulation we have seen in the playoff era. We've seen it multiple times. We saw it in 2022 at the Charlotte Roval when Suarez Racing told Cole Custer to basically check up to help Chase Briscoe get in. There was no flat tire on the car, and it was completely intentional what they were doing at that point. So I think when it does come to race manipulation on here, I think NASCAR, they want to prevent it. And NASCAR, it's no secret, they were really pissed off of what happened at Martinsville last year. So I think they're trying to avoid that by making these new rules. And I do worry that there's going to be some candles that are going to come into play. And I think there's definitely some effects that will be made in regards to this. There's definitely some people that are frustrated with the situation in NASCAR, definitely. But you've got to wonder how the teams are feeling and how the manufacturers feel. And I think the manufacturers definitely will have a big effect on some of the things that do happen, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, we talked about all the other people involved with some of the Stewart-Haas racing stuff in regards to some of the big silly season stuff that happened last year. But one Ford driver that I forgot to mention in the first video I saw earlier today was Zane Smith. Now, Zane Smith, of course, we all know is going to be driving full-time for Rev Motorsports in 2025, driving the number 38 car. And Zane Smith basically said after his announcement he would not be back with Trackhouse Racing in 2025. He basically said his focus was trying to get back over to Rev Motorsports. There was a lot of chatter at one point about Chandler Smith and Sam Mayer being the two front runners for the third Rev Motorsports C. But the big thing that was really holding up the Zane Smith signing from taking place was the lawsuit going on between 2011 Front Row and NASCAR. Both 2011 and Front Row Motorsports have teamed up with NASCAR in regards to antitrust claims. And NASCAR originally did not want to approve the charter sale. That 38 or the Ford charter basically were part of the sale from Stewart-Haas Racing. And basically NASCAR did not want to oblige and let them get that purchase through because of this. And NASCAR is currently appealing this at this point. And Zane Smith did feel a lot of pressure, definitely, and there was a lot of frustration from his camp and side of things because he really wanted to sign with Front Row and go back to them. Now, luckily for Zane Smith, there was able to get a thing reached, at least at the time, where they were able to let the purchase go through. The judge, at a time, the current guy is in the lawsuit, Judge Kenneth Bell, basically told NASCAR, you have to let the transfer go through, otherwise you're going to be in a lot of trouble, which NASCAR was forced and basically had to oblige to go ahead and let them sign it. And I think that for Zane Smith, he made the right choice to go back to Front Row. They're a team that is really in a good position, in my opinion, right now. They've shown a lot of improvement, and I think this is a team that really could have a fantastic and strong year in 2025 as they continue to grow with their Tier 1 support going into the season. So I'm excited to see what Zane Smith can do in 2025. And I do understand that Zane Smith was really frustrated not knowing for sure if he was going to be with this program this year, but I do think that Zane Smith could have a very solid year in 2025 with Front Row. He's got two really good teammates in Noah Gragson and Todd Gillen in 2025, and two young truck teammates of Chandler Smith and Lane Briggs going into the year. Overall, I think Zane Smith's in a really solid position, and I like the direction where Front Row Motorsports is headed going into the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen also during production days spoke to Bob Pockrass in regards to his goals for 2025 as Bob Pockrass had asked him, what are your goals for 2025? And Shane Van Gisbergen had a very interesting answer that kind of caught me off guard and surprised me. He says he really doesn't have any goals going into 2025. He obviously knows that he has to learn a lot going into the year, and it's going to be a big learning curve, but he also knows he has to get better on the ovals if he's going to want to be competing for a championship in 2025. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, is going full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series this year with Trackhouse Racing in the number 88 car, with Stephen Duran being the crew chief. He was the crew chief for Zane Smith in 2024. They started you off on a very, very solid note. At the Cookout Clash, I wasn't even sure if he was going to be able to make it to the final round and make it to the main, and he did incredible. He got himself in pretty efficiently and also ran very, very well at Bowman Gray, where he finished inside the top 10 and legitimately ran around that 9th to 12th range most of the night and finished in 9th place. For someone who's never ran on a quarter-mile short track, that is super impressive. But I go back to Martinsville. They had a very similar tire at Bowman Gray they had in Martinsville, and he looked very, very good out there at Martinsville as well, where he finished in 12th place. Look, Shane Van Gisbergen is no secret. He is going to struggle at times on ovals throughout the year. But I think if there's anybody that can really pick it up and get up to speed a lot quicker, it is Shane Van Gisbergen. He wants to learn. He wants to get better. Last year, he showed so much improvement, especially in the second half on the ovals. I go back to the beginning of the year like Phoenix. He finished 6th there early in the year. I go back to Phoenix in the fall. Finished 11th or 12th there. And I know the end of the year wasn't as strong at Kaitlyn Racing at some tracks, but he had some very impressive performances in 2024 in Xfinity. And I look for him to get a lot better this year and only just get stronger in 2025. I really think that this team has a lot of promise and a lot of potential going into this year. And I think that if there's someone, like I said, who really can take that step forward and get better, it is Shane Van Gisbergen. I think we all know that SVG is going to be a major factor on road courses. I have him winning a couple road course races this year. I don't think he goes to victory lane on an oval. I think it'd be extremely impressive if he can win an oval race in 2025, but I think that's going to be very, very tough for him to get that done this year. But I do think, like I said, it is going to be a very strong season for Shane Van Gisbergen in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think he could have a chance of getting the round of 12. You've got the roll there, so maybe he makes the round of 8 if he gets multiple wins. They're not changing the playoff format this year, so with the playoff format pretty much staying the same for 2026, 5. Maybe yes, changes are coming in 2026. I do think Shane could have a very strong year. We'll see what Shane Van Gisbergen can do with the Trackhouse Racing organization in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez also was asked by Bob Pockrass about what big changes have taken place at Trackhouse Racing for 2025. And Daniel Suarez feels like going into 2025, there definitely is a lot of pressure for Trackhouse Racing to perform. He knows that Trackhouse Racing has not really had the same pace and speed they had a couple years ago in 2022 and 2023, as they definitely took a step backwards in 2024. Well, yes, Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez were both able to go to victory lane in their respective rides. Daniel Suarez had a very mediocre season and only signed a one-year contract extension with Trackhouse Racing, while Ross Chastain got a win and, to be fair, probably ran a lot better where the finishes showed. There's also a ton of inconsistency as well. Now, going into this year for Daniel Suarez, he is in a contract year with Trackhouse Racing. And I look at Daniel Suarez. This is going to have to be a massive step-up year for Daniel Suarez. If we still had the 4 charters available and teams could expand to 4 charter programs, I don't think Daniel Suarez will be on the hot seat going into this year. However, because of how good Connor Zilisch is, and with the fact that we're going to see Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain drive the 9 car for Junior Motorsports part-time, and Suarez was not part of that announcement, though that could get announced down the road that he could do some starts in that car. I think that's a little bit concerning. And one race that I think is going to be very important to watch for Daniel Suarez fans is COTA in about a month from now. Remember, Connor Zilisch is going to be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut at Circuit Americas in the Red Bull machine number 87 at COTA. And there's a lot of hype around Connor. Connor Zilisch is a super talented race car driver who certainly has a massive amount of potential to do very strong in 2025. And I really think that there's a very good chance Connor Zilisch, I don't know if he's going to go out there and win, but I think if he gets that, it's very possible that he could definitely get a top 5 when we get to Circuit of the Americas. I really do think it's going to be a great season for Connor Zilisch and Xfinity, and he's going to have a strong year. So if you're Daniel Suarez going into 2025, you realistically need to be contending for wins at times. You need to be close to your teammate Ross Chastain. And people saying, what about SVG? Is he going to lose his seat? No, absolutely not. Shane Van Gisbergen isn't going anywhere anytime soon. He's got a lot of money with him. He's in his mid-30s. He's got a lot of talent. He's going to be a guy that can probably get you a couple of wins. So you don't have to worry about Shane Van Gisbergen leaving the team. It's going to basically be what happens with the program this year and what really happens with Shane and with Daniel Suarez. If Daniel Suarez, like I said, can improve and be consistent and run up front and do really, really well, I don't see him going anywhere next year. But I think Suarez very likely is out of Trackhouse Racing at the end of the year, unfortunately. I think this is definitely a contract year for him, and he really needs to have a strong, good season. Otherwise, like I said, it is very, very likely that, unfortunately, he will not be back with the team. I hope I'm proven wrong and he can run really, really good this year. But like I said, I don't expect much. I do think it's going to be tougher for him to be super, super competitive, and I think he needs to do really well. There's a lot of people not expecting him to make the playoffs this year. He needs to have a big year. Otherwise, like I said, it is very, very likely that he will not be back with this team of Trackhouse Racing in 2026 and might be headed to a new program. We'll see what happens. Hope he can run well enough so he can potentially stick around with the team that he's driving for going into 2026. I predict he goes to Kaulig at this point, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Donald Trump. Now, I did a video covering this on the channel earlier this evening, but it was announced and confirmed earlier this evening and reported by Ed O'Keefe from CBS Sports, or CBS with the correspondence for the White House, that it's expected that Donald Trump is expected to attend the 2025 Daytona 500. It's unknown at this point if he'll rip laps around the track. He did do that in 2020, but it's very likely he'll be attending the 2025 Daytona 500. This would be the second year in a row that Donald Trump has actually attended a NASCAR race. Remember, Donald Trump attended the 2024 Coca-Cola 600. When he went there, unfortunately, the race got rained out, and Fox pretty much called it early. This, of course, before Donald Trump became the president once again for a second term. And now he's back in 2025 for the Daytona 500. I believe this actually will be the 4th Daytona 500 that he has attended. He attended the Daytona 500, I believe, back in 1999. I think he also attended the Daytona 500 in 2001. And then he also attended Daytona 500 in 2020. So this will be the first time he's attended a Daytona 500 in half a decade, going back to 2020. He also is the first president before himself. The last time we had a president show up to Daytona, I believe, was George H.W. Bush back in 2004. You also, of course, had other presidents that have attended NASCAR races in the history of the sport. Back in 1984, you had Ronald Reagan attend when Richard Petty won his 200th career NASCAR Cup Series race. And he also did, of course, have George W. Bush attend the 1992 Pepsi 400 and was able to give the command for that race. So, yes, Donald Trump, we all know, is a super controversial figure. Everyone talks about him. I'm not going to get specifically in how I feel politically, but I think it's definitely kind of crazy that Donald Trump is showing up once again to another NASCAR race. Now, some are going to say that Donald Trump is not going to stay around forever, and he's not going to stick around, and he's going to leave early. Apparently, from what some people said that attended the race, and I think Seriously Fast Media had responded to somebody on Twitter, apparently Donald Trump stuck around for a very long time and hung out with Richard Childress, which Donald Trump does have a really good friendship with a lot of people in the NASCAR industry, including Richard Childress. I mean, he brought Richard Childress up to one of his podiums, I think back in 2016, and maybe even during this election cycle as well, I'm pretty sure. So I think it's not completely shocking and surprising to see this, that he is going to be attending, because I think that Donald is a fan of NASCAR. I mean, why would he attend only a few races, right? and not just a 10. He's got a lot of things and very important things he has to do revolving around the country. But I think it's still kind of crazy and cool in a way, too, that he is showing up and going to be at this year's Daytona 500. It is a huge deal to have the President of the United States show up, regardless of how you feel politically about the individual and some of the things you believe in, whether you like the guy or not. It is a really, really huge deal to have someone very important and a very important figure in the United States, and someone who is important, who is running the country currently at the moment, showing up to NASCAR races and going out and doing stuff. Again, I think it's a huge deal for NASCAR as a whole, right? I think it's a massive, massive deal. And again, seeing the President of the United States show up to Daytona 500, say what you want to say. I think it's cool in my opinion personally, and I think it's kind of wild also at the same time that he is going to be at this year's Daytona 500. But again, I do think it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening and if he does stay around for a very, very long time. But again, I do think it's kind of wild. I think the comment section for this video definitely interesting with the comments here, but I think it's certainly interesting that he will go ahead and show up at this year's Daytona 500. Certainly interesting stuff around that, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. Now, we have talked about Hendrick Motorsports a lot on this channel over the course of the last couple weeks because we've been hearing a lot of speculation that Hendrick Motorsports once again will be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. Now, Chad Canals had formally confirmed it on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio a couple weeks ago, but earlier today, Lionel's Twitter page, or X page if you like to call them that, they went ahead and posted the number 17 HendrickCars.com Chevrolet for the NASCAR Xfinity Series and also confirmed that Corey Day is expected to drive that number 17 car. This isn't shocking or surprising, right? We've been hearing a lot of chatter and speculation that Corey Day is going to make a lot of starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. He, of course, will make 8 starts in the Craftsman Truck Series with Spire Motorsports in the number 7 truck. We already talked about the fact he's going to make 4 ARCA starts in the number 77 as well in ARCA, and he's also going to make quite a few starts in the Trans Am Series for Hendrick Motorsports or whatever program they have, most likely the Pinnacle Racing Group over there. But the 17 car coming back in Xfinity is really cool. The 17 car was finally able to go to victory lane in 2024 on 2 different occasions. They won with Kyle Larson in Circuit Americas after Shane Van Gisbergen and Austin Dillon pretty much took each other out, and Shane Van Gisbergen got a penalty on the white flag of the race at Circuit of the Americas. Kyle Larson came up and passed on the last couple laps and took the victory. And then they won at Charlotte with Chase Elliott, where Chase Elliott had one of the dominant cars in the field, really showed up out of nowhere in the event, considering Chase Elliott, the last time he drove the 17 car, he really, really struggled. But he took that 17 car to victory lane. And I do expect going into the year that all 4 current full-time NASCAR Cup drivers are probably going to get behind the wheel of this car at some point. Kyle Larson, I expect to probably make around 2 or 3 starts in the car. Probably very similar schedule to what he had in 2024. I would expect Chase Elliott to make maybe 2 or 3 starts. He made 2 starts, I believe, last year in that car, and of course he got a win in that car. William Byron, I would think, would get a majority of the starts of the full-time guys, and then Alex Bowman also, I do expect to make a few starts in that seat as well. And then finally, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a Roger Kroof showing up and getting behind the wheel of that seat this year. Roger Kroof is rumored to be driving for Junior Motorsports in the number 9 car at some point. Yes, he'll be full-time with the number 71 team for Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, and there's also potential possibility that Roger could maybe down the road make some Cup starts at some point this year with the 4th Spire Motorsports car, which we know the Spire is going to have a 4th part-time car in the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, down the road, could we see the number 17 Hendrick car go full-time in Xfinity competition? I wouldn't rule out that possibility at this point because of Corey Day. If Corey Day does exceptional in his starts in Xfinity this year, we could see him go full-time at Hendrick Motorsports in the number 17 car. And there's a lot of hype around Corey Day, and I think it's justified. Corey Day, very talented driver on the dirt side of things. I think he's got a lot of potential. You never know. He could be the replacement for Kyle Larson down the road. Kyle Larson's contract only currently goes through 2026, though I don't think Corey Day is in any way, shape, or form ready for a full-time NASCAR Cup Series stint. But if he does exceptional and does really, really good this year in his select races, that being Corey Day, I could then, like I said, see him getting the chance and opportunity to go full-time in one of these respective series, which I think is a long-term planning goal. They're easing him into it. They're putting him in a lot of races, but they're not putting him full-time in one respective series. They want to see what he can do in multiple different disciplines. If he does well enough, I think he'll get to choose the opportunity to be full-time. We also do have to remember one thing. I believe Corey Day just turned 18 years old last year, I'm pretty sure. So he's still got a lot of time to wait around. And if he wants to go cup racing long-term with Hendrick, he probably will have to wait a few years, because you look at the Hendrick lineup, right? Currently at the moment, you've got Chase Elliott, who will be turning 30. Alex Bowman's the oldest, or second oldest, and he's 31, I believe. And Kyle Larson's the oldest, and he's only 32. So they've got a very young lineup currently at the moment that's very, very talented. Now that lineup is starting to get a little bit older at this point, but all the drivers are signed for the foreseeable future at this moment, and none of them, I don't think, are going anywhere anytime soon. So again, back to the car, I think the number 17 Hendrick car will compete for wins. I wouldn't rule out possibly Kyle Busch getting by the wheel of that car, by the way, at some point. I'll just say that. But I will say, I think this car will win multiple victories in Xfinity. I'm predicting the same two guys that won last year, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, to go to victory lane in those cars. I just think that they're going to come back behind the wheel and win again. And I think we also could see Alex Bowman, William Byron go to victory lane, but I'm not as confident at this point on that front. But again, I think it's great that the Hendrick 17 car will be back this year. And I think that car, like I said, will have a great chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. Maybe Corey Day surprised a lot of people and wins some Xfinity races. I think that'd be absolutely insane if that truly ended up happening. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. But again, I think it's absolutely great to see that the Hendrick car's number 17 machine is back this year. Again, I do think it truly ends up going to victory lane. And I think it truly will have the pace and speed to be a massive contender this year in the Xfinity Series in 2025. Excited to see this car officially back for this year. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List discussion below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about the Hendrick cars, the Chevrolet Xfinity car returning? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Donald Trump attending the Daytona 500? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any major news that does break over the next couple days, we'll discuss here live on the channel. If not, the next time you'll see me, we'll be doing most likely the Truck Series one, but probably predictions for the schedule for 2026, maybe the paint scheme video as well. We've got the bowl predictions dropping for 2025 and Super Bowl predictions dropping on the second channel later today as well. We've got content of people like Haley Dean, Connor Zilish, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Shane Van Gisbergen, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Zane Smith, Chandler Smith, Eric Almirola, Sheldon Creed, all those big name people, Frankie Muniz, Clinton McFarland, Elio Castroneves, Chandler Smith, you name it, all that good stuff will be dropping on the channel very, very soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.